Most of the Clone Wars was a stalemate, with the Republic and the Confederacy rarely establishing serious advantages over each other. Major offenses were occasionally successful, such as the Republic's attack on Munich near the start of the war and the Confederacy's campaigns in the Core Worlds. But the outcome of the war was anyone's guess. That changed late in 20 BBY when, slowly, the Republic started winning. First came a series of successful counter-offensives in the Core Worlds, and then the Outer Rim sieges began, the final stage of the war. But how did this reversal of fortune happen, and how did the Outer Rim sieges work exactly? In this video, we'll be answering those questions.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The Clone Wars were unlike any conflict the galaxy had ever seen, but at the same time, they followed a familiar pattern. Over the course of its history, the Republic had often struggled against factions that pursued the so-called stateless strategy of galactic warfare. Factions using this strategy took advantage of the vastness of space by hiding their fleets in remote, unmapped pockets of the Outer Rim, maintaining very little territory, if any. Due to the sheer size of the Star Wars galaxy, factions with no territory to defend could be both everywhere and nowhere at the same time, able to strike in enemy territory or hide deep in space as they saw fit. Larger, more centralized governments usually struggled to combat this. They were left with a dilemma. They could defend their territory against incursions, allowing the enemy to build up their fleets, or they could attempt to comb space for the enemy, leaving their homeworlds open to attack. The Confederacy of Independent Systems made use of a variant of the stateless strategy. The CIS did have its own territory and a fair bit of it too, but they were usually left to defend themselves while the CIS military focused almost exclusively on offensives against the Republic. The Separatist fleet made brilliant use of the stateless strategy, despite the fact that it did actually have a state and territory to defend, unlike most factions that took this approach to galactic warfare. In part, the Clone Wars were in a state of stalemate for so long because of this dynamic. As the Clone Wars progressed, however, the dynamic began to shift a little on the Republic side, though very few noticed it. Throughout the Clone Wars, the Galactic Senate began giving increasingly more power to Palpatine, who used much of that power to nationalize industries and consolidate the Republic's industrial base. This was crucial, and it was bad news for the CIS. The Separatists are often thought of as being the more industrialized side. After all, the most well-known mech worlds of the galaxy were all Separatist worlds. But in reality, the industrial might of the Confederacy paled before that of the Republic. Even at its weakest, the Republic controlled much more of the galaxy than the Confederacy, and it had a firm grasp on several key industrial regions. As Palpatine consolidated power, he directed the Republic in harnessing that industrial power, as the Separatists had since the beginning. Slowly, the industrial base of the Republic transformed into a massive military machine, and when that happened, the GAR began to win. The Republic never found a true counter to the stateless strategy. Instead, as the Essential Guide to Warfare puts it, it outgrew the problem entirely. The centralization of Republic industry allowed the Republic military to both defend its homeworlds and attack Separatist positions, and the CIS could do little to compensate. Over the course of 20 BBY, the Republic gradually whittled away Separatist territory, pushing out into the Rim even as the Confederacy attacked the core. By the end of the year, roughly 30 months into the Clone Wars, the Confederacy had been reduced to 6 major pockets of territory in the Outer Rim, each regions where the greatest strongholds of the CIS were located. Republic strategists named each of these theaters after a major target in each of them. In the Galactic North, on the edge of the new territories, were the Megiddo Theater bordering Wild Space and the Sereno Theater on the Outer Hidean, regions that were once part of one long strip of Separatist space. Around the Tyon Cluster and the foundry of the Confederacy was the Felucia Theater, while the Cisgene Theater was located at the end of the Corellian Run in the Hutt's sphere of influence. Separatist territory along the Rimmer trade route had also been split in half, divided into the Yag'Dhul Theater in the Inner Rim and the Pre-Sitlan Theater in the Outer Rim. Officially, the Outer Rim sieges began with the Battle of Boz Pity in 20 BBY, when the Republic struck deep into the Felucia Theater and claimed what had previously been a major separatist redoubt. In the aftermath of this, the Republic began a massive offensive against all 6 pockets of separatist space, dedicating nearly all of the Republic military to a grand siege of the entire Confederacy. Separatist units were left with little choice but to dig in and make the Republic pay for every world that fell. The fighting in the Outer Rim sieges was some of the nastiest of the Clone Wars. The Republic pushed separatist forces back system by system, and on world after world, the Confederacy fought to the last, taking shelter in colossal fortresses and under shield generators. Some droid units entrenched themselves so deep in planets' crusts that the Republic had no choice other than to use orbital bombardment to flush them out. Occasionally, separatist units would break the siege and attack the Republic worlds near the battlefront, but for the most part, the last battles of the Clone Wars were fought entirely within separatist space. In the Megiddo Theater, the longest battle of the Clone Wars became the centerpiece of a much larger campaign. Plo Koon and the other prominent Jedi helped break separatist lines at Wallander and Garki, opening up new supply lines for Republic forces entrenched on Megiddo itself. On the other side of the new territories, Republic forces attacked Ord Radama and New Bornelix, hoping to blaze a path to Sereno and Selenon, key separatist political bastions. These objectives were of a somewhat lower priority than those in other theaters, so the Sereno theater saw relatively little fighting. In the Yag'Dhul theater, Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi led a long campaign up the Corellian trade spine, fighting major battles on Bomis Kori, Tar Morden, and Sarish. In the Pre-Sitlin theater to the south, forces from Eriadu beleaguered Sluisvan, Triton, and Zagobah, all important industrial worlds for the Seps. In the Siskine theater, Loyalist forces hunted their separatist counterparts in a deadly game of cat and mouse, rooting out war fleets and attacking some of the Confederacy's most obscure strongholds. Telenroeg, Tyth, Lannick, and Ragmar were all besieged, while nearby Ryloth was also the sites of a battle. The fighting in the other theaters paled before the sheer carnage that happened in the Felucia theater, however. That pocket of separatist space had always been the burning heart of the CIS, home to the swath of industrial worlds known as the Foundry of the Confederacy. The separatists weren't willing to give any of those systems up without a fight. The Battle of Felucia and the Siege of Seleucami, 2 of the longest and bloodiest Outer Rim sieges, were both in this sector. Battles were also fought on Ossus, Delaut, Mokana, Belderone, and Tula. The Republic had the upper hand in the Outer Rim sieges, but most battles were hard fought, and civilians living in Republic space couldn't tell if the GAR was actually winning or if the CIS would rebound again. The line between victory and defeat became blurred as the bodies began to pile up on hundreds of separatist backwaters. All the while, more and more of the Republic military poured into the Outer Rim, fully committed to the 6 theaters. Even the Coruscant Defense Fleet sent units out to assist in the battles on Megiddo, Felucia, and Seleucami. 3 worlds Palpatine proclaimed to be a triad of evil. This weakening of Coruscant's home guard would soon prove to be a mistake, a deliberate one. Unbeknownst to all but a few, the Outer Rim sieges weren't what they appeared to be. They were a colossal diversion orchestrated by Darth Sidious, Count Dooku, and General Grievous, a trap that the Republic walked right into. The sieges were intended to occupy as much of the Republic military as possible in remote corners of the Outer Rim, and to leave the Jedi scattered across 1,000 blood-soaked backwaters. While the Republic came ever closer to taking the heart of the Confederacy, it had left its own vulnerable. The outcome of this, as we all know, was the Battle of Coruscant. General Grievous stripped nearly the entire Yag'Dhul theater of assets for the Battle of Coruscant, a moment that he believed would win the war for the Confederacy. Instead, the Republic won the Battle of Coruscant, leaving separatist forces reeling. Before the fires had all been extinguished in Galactic City, the Republic returned to the Outer Rim sieges with renewed vigor, capitalizing on the Confederacy's disarray and the unexpected deployment of massive reinforcement fleets at the battle's end. Separatist lines quickly crumbled, especially in the Yag'Dhul theater. The Confederacy managed to pull off one of the last offensives at Kashyyyk, but the assault was doomed before it had even begun. The CIS had already lost. After the Battle of Coruscant, the Clone Wars were effectively over. A few days later, the droid army was deactivated and the Confederacy of Independent Systems ceased to exist. The Outer Rim sieges successfully whittled away what remained of the CIS, beating it into submission in a costly but effective campaign. But what do you think? Are there any particular theaters of the sieges that you'd like to see us discuss? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.